Well, good evening and welcome to our Earth Week program. And hopefully you'll get some information that you can use. We have Cedar Grove here, who they turn our kitchen waste and our plant detritus into black gold.
Yes.
Recology takes our clean and dry recyclable items and preps them for reuse in something else we need to bring into our apartment. And SPU takes everything that has no value and only costs money to get rid of and puts it on the train to Oregon, right? Okay. And Barbara Brown, if you haven't met Barbara Brown, she's our environmental services manager, and she is Barbara. And I said, Barbara, I want you here because I want everybody to know who you are. And she's such an important part of the whole program. And she's going to take over the MC job. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm also here, so if you're having any problem with the microphones, I can have fixed that too. So the first speaker tonight is going to be Laura Clinch. Yes, Laura Clinch. She is from Recology, so they are over the recycling. And the way, if you go into your trash rooms, they'll have the barrels there that say this goes for newspapers or wine bottles or anything that gets recycled. Okay, Laura?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Laura. I work with Recology. I'm a waste zero specialist. And so I'm going to tell you all about kind of who Recology is, what our mission is, and I'm going to go in pretty depth about recycling, but also compost and trash. So here we go. So you've probably seen this truck all over town. This is what hauls your recycling, your compost, and your garbage here from Horizon House to wherever it ends up, which I will talk about. So we are employee owned, and we started in the Bay Area. That's where our headquarters are, and then we worked our way up. So our areas are mostly Bay Area, Portland, and King County, Puget Sound region. So we're a hauler and a processor. So we haul the materials and then we also process them. Most of our processing is recycling, but we do process some compost in other regions as well. We have 12 Puget Sound communities. We just picked up North Bend, which is really exciting, so we'll be working with them in the future. And then, so some other aspects of our company are we have a team called Streetscapes, and that's the team who keeps the streets clean, as you could probably guess by the name. So they'll go to a lot of events and they'll clean up afterwards. So they'll kind of work through the night into the morning, getting everything cleaned up after an event. They also clean up graffiti and stuff like that around the city. We have retail storefronts. So there's 4 different stores around the King County area, and they are basically a waste zero gift shop and also a recycling center, which I will also talk about a little bit later. And then my team, the Waste Zero team, we are who does the education and outreach, and that's pretty important, so I'm glad to be part of the team. So our biggest mission is to divert as much material from the landfill as possible. So you can see here is kind of an example of how that can be done. We'll go to a property and we'll assess kind of what they're throwing away, where they're putting it. Oftentimes when we first visit, they're throwing a lot of stuff into the garbage. And then our goal in the end of it is to kind of reduce their trash service and increase their recycling and compost. So you can see here that big gray container up top. In the bottom photo, it's switched to that smaller cart on the left there. So, and then you can also see that their recycle has increased and so has their compost. So through education and providing materials, we can reduce the garbage going to the landfill, which is really exciting. So recycling. This is, of course, your kind of average recycling cart. And let's talk about what goes in there. So glass, metal cans, aluminum, that sort of thing, plastics, and paper and cardboard. So these are, of course, the basics of what goes in there, and then the common contaminants are plastic film and plastic bags. Those do not go in the recycling, as well as even if it's a rigid plastic, if it's too small, it cannot go into the recycle because it just won't go through our machines properly. Also, if the plastic is food soiled, you can see that smoothie cup has quite a bit of smoothie kind of remnants left in it. That can contaminate the rest of the materials that are going to the recycle, and it can end up causing not just that cup to go to the landfill, but kind of everything surrounding it. A pretty tricky one is, you see the envelope up in that right corner. So the reason why that is a contaminant is because of that plastic window. A lot of people don't realize that the plastic window is not, it makes it not recyclable. So either throw the whole envelope in the trash, or ideally remove the window, throw that window away. The rest of it can go in the recycle. Of course, this container that's full of food, it's also styrofoam. That's a no-no. Any snack wrappers, sharps, gloves, like latex gloves, and then those like metal, that technically is recyclable, but it cannot go in your bin because it's very large. So, as I kind of mentioned before, things have to be empty, clean, and dry in order to be recycled. And like I said, this is because we don't want to be contaminating the recycle. So you want to empty it out. If you can, rinse it out, and then just kind of shake that water out of there as well as you can, and then you should be good to go. If you want to go above and beyond, you could leave it on your drying rack overnight just to make sure it's fully dry. So just kind of an example. On the left here, you can see that those are clean and recyclable. And on the right side, those are a bit too food soiled to be recycled. So that plastic container, you could rinse that out and dry it out and then recycle it. Could potentially wipe out that more papery one, but it could be sort of soaked through. So it's kind of a situation by situation. You gotta kind of use your best judgment there. Here's another common sort of issue that we see is boxes that aren't broken down. We really want to break down those boxes because it, of course, reduces the volume that you're putting into the recycle. If you're putting in large, unbroken down boxes, the bin is going to get full really fast, and then it could overflow, which could make it so that your recycle doesn't get picked up, or you might get a fee. So you really want to be breaking down those boxes. Okay, so this is kind of a quiz. How do we feel about these items? Do we think that these would go in the garbage or the recycle?
But not the lid.
Nice. So the lid is a good point. That lid, since it's plastic and the bottle is plastic, it can stay on. If it was a metal lid, or if it was like a glass bottle with a plastic lid, then you would have to remove the lid. But since those are both plastic, that's totally fine. Okay. How do we feel about that one? Okay, so we're not too sure about this one. So that lid, it's metal, and it's 3 inches or greater. So 3 inches is the rule of thumb. If an item is 3 inches or larger, it can go into the recycle. If it's smaller than 3 inches, you want to toss that, unless you can connect it to the bottle if it's the same material.
What about the can? Are you going to talk about?
We'll take questions at the end. We'll take questions at the end.
So the can is also recyclable. And then what about these ones? These are like little caps. You kind of just talked about that. Yeah, that's a no-go. You're right. Okay. So here's just some more no-nos. No shredded paper. No plastic bags or plastic wrap, plastic film. None of that. So we want to keep the items loose if we can. We don't want to bag them, and that's for reasons that I'll talk about that when we talk about, actually we'll talk about it right now. Okay, so where does your recycling go? It goes to our MRF, where it's sorted, and then baled, and then it's sent off to different locations. The different materials go to different locations to actually be processed and made into new things. So this is our MRF. It's our materials recovery facility. And, it's supposed to be a video. Oh, yeah, here we go. So this is one of the first stages in our MRF. The items will go on this conveyor belt, and they'll go over that machine there that's got those spinny things that brings it on to the new section. But if there were plastic bags in here, you can probably imagine how they would get super gummed up in that machine. Here's just another example of, so the first step is actual human beings sorting through. Kind of initially, they just, as quickly as they can, they grab out all of the contaminants that they can. This is a pretty fun one. It's a magnet, so that's picking up all the metals. Yeah, that's pretty fun. And then this one it uses air pressure. It detects what kind of plastic is going through there, and then it blows it. Depending on what kind of plastic it is, it blows it to different places. So here you can see the bales of the like materials being put together there. So here you can see the plastic getting stuck in that machine. Someone has to go in there and remove it by hand, and they have to shut down the entire mechanism, the whole facility. So it's a huge waste of time. It's dangerous. Yeah, so we don't want any plastic bags going in there. Hoses are another thing that can get caught in there. And then of course liquids and food waste, it just makes it a mess. We don't want that. Okay, so this is as of 2019, so it could be slightly different now, but generally this is kind of where things are going when you recycle them here in Seattle. So 28% of the material, it actually gets recycled and processed in Seattle. So once it leaves the MRF, it stays in Seattle to get turned into something else. About 38%, it stays in North America, and then about 34% gets shipped off to Asia. And that's mostly, the stuff that's going to Asia is mostly paper and cardboard. So here's some examples of what things get turned into when they get recycled. So cardboard often gets turned into cereal boxes, tissues, printing paper, all sorts of different paper materials. Mixed paper gets turned into paper towels. And the paper, when it gets turned into different materials, it's kind of just, it's based on how, like, the integrity of the final product. So the paper towels, they're kind of like a softer material, so they're kind of like a less valuable outcome, but they're still, of course, being reused. So All right, so the plastic, so detergent bottles, they get turned into buckets, different types of containers, frisbees, stadium seats. Again, these are just examples. There's all sorts of things that they could get turned into. Milk jugs get turned into play sets, plastic lumber, or new bottles. And here's just more examples. So another kind of plastics, they get turned into storage containers, dishware, brooms, brushes, rakes. It can get turned into backpacks, polar fleece, kind of the insulation in sleeping bags and jackets. Aluminum, they get turned into cars, beams, furniture, appliances, lamps, art, all sorts of things. Glass mostly is just turned into new bottles, jars, and as well as fiberglass. So moving on to compost. I'm going to kind of speed through this section just because we have Cedar Grove here who is going to go super into depth with compost. So I don't want to kind of double up on too many things, but in general, compost is food waste, yard waste, or plant matter, or food soiled paper. Another sort of grouping of items that can be composted are the paper or wood products. So like chopsticks, paper bags, paper containers, as well as these commercially compostable packaging. You have to make sure that it says commercially compostable. I know that it can get really confusing because sometimes it just looks like plastic, and you don't want to be putting compostable plastic into the recycle because it's not recyclable, so you really got to pay attention to the wording. So yeah, but in general, if it says commercially compostable, you are good to put it in your compost. And then of course, you don't want to be putting any pet or animal waste into the compost. Yeah. So here's some common contaminants in compost. We got glass is a big one. Of course, plastic film, again, you don't want that to go in the compost. That envelope, again, gotta be careful about that. A big one is the fruit stickers. A lot of people, there's rumors that these stickers are, you can consume them and they will digest. So maybe some people think that because of that you can compost it, but that's not true. Don't want to be putting those stickers in the compost. So just take a few extra seconds and just take that sticker off. Utensils are a big one just because it's often you're putting food waste in the compost, so you might drop a utensil in there, so just keep in mind we don't want that happening. And yeah, you can see that pet waste there. Styrofoam as well. So here is a photo, I believe this is a photo of Cedar Grove. This is where your compost goes, and Sierra will talk about what happens there, but yeah, basically it's ground up, gets put into piles, and sits there for a while, kind of breaking down. It gets turned, water gets added to it, all sorts of things, and then in the end you have compost that you can buy at the store. It's pretty cool. And here again, just kind of a photo, some photos of what it looks like during the process. So it goes in as kind of pretty looking stuff, and then it gets broken down, and then it's soil. So again, life cycle of compost is you're putting your food waste in your bin, gets picked up, gets taken to a composting facility, gets turned into soil, and then you can create new life and new food with that soil. So garbage, boo. Here's some examples of what you should be putting in your garbage. These Amazon packages, they're plastic, but they're too much of a film, so they cannot go in your recycle. They have to go in the garbage. There are certain facilities that can recycle them, but you gotta really do your research and make sure you're sending it to the right place. So overall, those are usually garbage. All sorts of plastic film, snack wrappers, those little K-pods, those are garbage. Styrofoam, diapers, plastic straws. And your garbage goes on a train, gets shipped to Oregon, so not too far. So yeah. Here's kind of a sad photo. This is an example of a landfill in the area. It's not the landfill where your garbage is going to, but it's one in the area. As you can see, there's a beautiful image of Mount Rainier in the background, and it's just kind of ruined by this landfill that's just going to sit there for hundreds of years. So that's why we want to divert as much as possible so we can keep these beautiful landscapes beautiful. There's all sorts of items that they cannot go in any of your bins, but there are proper ways to dispose of them. I know that you all have resources here where you can place a lot of these items and they'll get taken to the right place. But if you're ever curious about what you can do with kind of an oddball item like a battery, light bulb, styrofoam, furniture, any sort of bulky item, you can go to kingcounty.gov/what-do-I-do-with, and you just enter in what you have, and then it will tell you where to bring it. It's pretty cool. Bagandfilmrecycling.org is a really great resource. So if you ever have plastic film, it can be recycled, but you have to take it to the right place. So if you type in where you are, it will tell you a location of where to bring your plastic film. These are some examples of locations around here-ish that you can bring plastic film.
What is Pueblo?
This is another resource on the Seattle.gov website. Again, you type in what you have, where you are, and it will tell you where to bring things. Another place where you can bring recyclables that are hard to recycle is the Recology store. The closest one to here is Shoreline. It's right on Aurora, near the Sherry's, if you're ever around that area. So you can bring lots of materials there to recycle, like textiles, batteries, small appliances. The Shoreline location doesn't take cooking oil, but all 3 of our other locations take cooking oil. Empty propane canisters, styrofoam has to be clean and dry, bikes and bike parts, fluorescent bulbs, and small electronics. And that pretty much covers it. So thank you so much.
We're going to do questions at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just introduce, thank you so much. Okay, our next speaker is Sierra. And Sierra is Arredondo. Yes, Arredondo. Good. Sierra, and she is from Cedar Grove. She's outreach coordinator. Can you help with this? If you step it right in there, right? Yes, perfect.
Hi everyone, yes, as she said, my name is Sierra. I'm with Cedar Grove. I've been with the company for just a couple months, but I'm so happy to be here and share the knowledge that I have with you guys. I think Cedar Grove is a pretty rad company. We do really amazing things. Just a little background, we've been a part of the recycling infrastructure in the Puget Sound area since 1938. And it wasn't until 1988 when the city of Seattle asked us to start taking organic material like yard waste. Thus, we started becoming a composting company, and then I started accepting food waste in 2004. So as Laura kind of touched on, the issue that we're trying to fight is a linear life cycle between our waste. When we throw away our things and they go to the landfill, they have a linear life cycle. There's just
one point A to point B. An estimated 35.3 million tons of wasted food goes to landfill pretty much every year. That was in 2018. So we're trying to mitigate as much as possible. And there's so many negative impacts when it comes to, well, all material going to landfill, but definitely organic material as well. It impacts the groundwater, increases greenhouse gas emissions, it reduces soil health, so a bunch of negative impacts.
Excuse me, could you slow down just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. I feel like I have a lot to say, and I want to make sure that I have enough time. So some solutions when it comes to composting. First of all, it's a circular life cycle. So when you grow produce and you cook it into food, there's food waste, you can turn it back into soil and then use it in your garden to grow food. So that right there is a circular life cycle that comes with a plethora of incredible benefits. And I'll touch on these benefits a little bit farther after we discuss what composting is. So as I mentioned, Cedar Grove alone single-handedly has been able to divert over 350,000 tons of organic material a year. Most of that is yard waste. A good portion of that is food waste. And so that's about 200,000 cubic yards of compost produced every year. So about 8,000 dump trucks or 60 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So that's a lot of material that we're very proud of. So first, let's talk about how composting works. There are lots of types of composting. I'm going to be heavily talking about the commercial composting since we are a commercial hauler. And if we have questions about backyard and at-home composting, I can touch on what I know with you. So this is our Everett facility. This is our baby, and this is the newer one out of the two that we have. It looks kind of small, it's only 10 acres, but we've been able to pump out so much compost and again, divert 350,000 tons just in our two facilities. So instead of having a landfill that increasingly increases in size due to mass, we have only ever kept these 10 acres and created amazing compost throughout it. So I'm going to start us off in our tipping building. That's our white building that you see right there, and then I'll go through the phases with you. So first, like you saw the Recology truck, we're going to start off with our Cedar Grove truck. They're both white. But this is collecting the food waste from any sort of organization that we service. We service Horizon House, so we could pretend it's servicing Horizon House. And then it's taken back to our tipping building. So that's that white building that I showed you. It gets dumped and then sorted with our sorters in the building with our contamination specialists. We kind of put everything in a pile first, and we need everything separated initially because when we add things together, our carbons and our nitrogens, which I'll get into, it has to be a specific kind of ratio. So that is it tipping into our tipping building. Next, we start the mixing process. So this is when we start creating that ratio with the matter that we have. So compost, much like baking a cake, it's a recipe. It has a 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So carbon, which we call the browns, that's wood waste, brown leaves, food, soil, paper bags, paper, that sort of thing. And that's why we divert a lot more yard waste because we need a lot more of it to create the compost. And then we have the 30-to-1. The 1 is nitrogen, and that's the food waste. So this next process is a pretty crucial point. It's awesome because we need to grind up all of that material. Because composting is a natural aerobic process, we need those bits to be small. That way air can pass through, the particles can pass through the spaces between the material. Much like when we exercise and we build up that internal heat, we need air between the material, so when the microbes get to working, they can build up that heat and cook up the bacteria. Now this is, like I said, a crucial point in the process because when we have contamination, it becomes very dire. So we are a zero blast policy.
A single bottle of glass in this process can break into 1 million pieces and then distribute in the compost. It is so hard to get out of. Pretty much the entire load of it is contaminated and no longer serviceable because we partner with schools and facilities and the zoo, and we don't want children to play with compost that has glass in it or planting. It's super hazardous. Same thing with plastic. Plastic is super hard. It gets broken up into 1 million pieces, and although we have a bunch of systems put in place to try to get as much contamination out as possible, it's very difficult. As Laura touched on, fruit stickers. It's so hard. They roll up, they're the same weight as compost, and they're so small they go through our netting screens. So that one's a big bugaboo. Next, we put our material on a conveyor belt, and this is going to distribute it from the tipping building to where we are going to create our piles. Not only is it distributing, but it's also mixing the material, and like Recology, we also have a magnet. So as it's going through this long conveyor belt, there's metal items being pulled out of the material. We've found nails, forks, we found wedding rings before, lots of fun things hidden in the material. So next, it gets put in these wonderful piles that we call heaps. Each one of these piles is 164 feet long, 10 feet tall, and 26 feet wide, so they are ginormous. And each one of them gets its own little blanket, which we call the Gore-Tex blanket. That is a pretty cool technology part of the process. It's a Gore-Tex jacket that's German-based technology that captures the heat and keeps all the moisture out. In this process, we don't add anything to it except oxygen and water. Everything else is a natural process, and all we're doing is just covering it up. That way we can encapsulate the heat. That is a picture of one of our machines that was created specifically for this process. It used to take so many men to get that giant cover on there, and then we were able to create a machine to tuck our heaps into bed there. So here's the phases. We have 4 different phases. As you can see, the top, there's the tipping building, and then you can see kind of our conveyor belt. This is an older picture. Our conveyor belt is much larger and longer now. And this goes into the first phase. That sits in that phase for about 28 days. And after that, it then gets removed to phase 2, which is 14 days, and then phase 3, which is another 14 days. It's really important to move the material because some parts of the compost can actually get hotter than others. So we need to move the material to mix it as well as distribute the heat. Make sure all of it's getting cooked out thoroughly. Also, fun fact, we try to recycle and use as much as we can. When it does rain, we do have holes at the bottom of our tarps, kind of in this area, that collect the leachate water, and then that water gets taken in pipes and taken to our lakes on site that gets filtered and then used to be put back into the piles. So again, trying to use as much as we can and recycling as much as we can. Oh, and sorry, the last phase is the 4th phase where they're uncovered. This is the aging phase. So they stay in this spot for about 3 months. That way they can naturally reduce heat because again, these piles can get up to 160 to 180 degrees naturally. So then we need to take the blankets off of them, let the heat simmer down, and then also it helps with drying out the material as well because it can get pretty moist. And then after that wonderful process, it gets turned into this really dark, rich, nutrient-dense material that again goes back into the community. Not only do we sell it in stores, you can find our material on site as well. We have 5 locations, but also again, like I said, it goes into the zoo, it goes into schools, a bunch of community projects. So let's talk about what's compostable. Laura touched on it already, and I just kind of want to dive into it a little bit further. Food. All food is compostable. We say if you can eat it, we can break it down. That includes shells and bones. So all food. Next is food soil paper. So that includes food soils, paper plates, paper towels, cardboard. It's really important to make sure that only food soiled paper and cardboard products are going to the compost, because the next best life for paper and cardboard products are in the recycling, just because they have the proper steps to break it down and turn it into something new. But when it's food soils, it actually shortens this strands in the cardboard and paper, so when it's broken down, it actually can't be put back together the same. That means it needs to be composted, to be broken down fully and used as soil. Another thing, paper towels is a really great way, or composting paper towels is a really great way to mitigate mass and landfills. We compost paper towels all the time. We love it. The only thing that we do tell people is that not to compost paper towels that have cleaning products on them. That's because cleaning products are antibacterial, and compost is a natural microbial bacterial process, so that antibacterial will actually kill the good process that we want. So no cleaning products. Also, approved compostable packaging. We're really proud of the compostable packaging that we have relationships with, and we are a CMA certified facility. CMA is this stamp of approval right here. This one. It stands for Compost Manufacturing Alliance, and it's a national certifier that actually tests their products at our facility to make sure that they break down, which is a super cool, awesome relationship that we have with CMA. All of our products have the stamp of approval. One thing I do want to talk about with packaging, because it can be really difficult to know what can be composted versus recycled. So just a fun little tidbit of information. This recycling sign here, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, please. This recycling sign with a 7 with a PLA underneath it stands for polylactic acid. So that, to me, is what I think, means that it indicates that it's made from corn or something other than plastic. However, we do need more symbols than that, because not all packaging, compostable packaging, is certified to actually break down. There's also a BPI symbol that has a plant on it that basically indicates that that product is made from plants. However, we like to take packaging that has the CMA logo on there because it's been tested to break down. And we want to have those products break down in our system. So closing the loop. Again, as I said earlier, composting is a closing the loop solution to mitigating food waste and all of the other harmful effects that landfills create. Some amazing solutions that come from that is monetary savings. It actually costs more money for your waste to go to a landfill than from composting. One of that is land, cost of land. Again, when you're accumulating stuff in a landfill, you're taking up more land space, where in a composting facility, it's constantly being recycled and created into new material. So that land mass is never changing. Creates more jobs. There's actually 2 to 3 times more jobs in compost than there is in waste management. And it reduces greenhouse gas emissions because composting is a natural process. It only emits CO2. Whereas the landfill will emit methane, which is 25 times more likely to trap in the heat that's quickly accumulating in the ozone layer because of greenhouse gases. Also, this is one of the coolest things that I just learned about, but it actually cleans stormwater. We have had studies tested at Washington State University testing compost with salmon, like the life of salmon, and it's been proven to filter out toxins in the water and improve the life and the health of salmon. And because salmon is so important culturally in Washington, it's really important that we protect our waters and our fish and our oceans, and compost can be a really great solution to filter the chemical runoff. Regenerates aquifers, increased soil health when you're using compost because it's so jacked with nutrient-rich amazingness. It can actually revitalize barren soil. So a bunch of solutions. Here is some of information about our Sound Sustainable Farm. We actually created this farm just to show the public how amazing the compost is in general. So this is a farm in Redmond, Washington, and we were able to turn 65 acres of fallow ground to full production only using our organic compost. So we're a certified organic farm, and we actually grow produce and sell it back to the restaurants in the area. So that's another full circle story we love sharing. Not only are we taking food waste and creating it into soil and giving it another life, we're also growing food and getting it back into the community so we can then get their food waste and do it all over again. So an incredible story. And lastly, you all can make a difference in this compost story. We have a fun thing that we say today. We like to say, let's talk trash, but sustainably. And mainly, it's okay not to know. I'm still learning in this process. I think it's an incredible journey just to be on, but there's so much out there that you kind of have to really get educated about what goes where and why. We say, when in doubt, find out, or when in doubt, throw it out. So if you truly have no idea where something goes and you don't have the resources, just throw it out, because it's either going to contaminate the recycling stream or the compost stream, and nobody wants that. Also use your resources. Getting educational materials, updating your signage is really important. I think we were discussing that earlier. Making sure, because times are changing and there's new laws, there's new regulations. Just recently we had to update our signage to make sure that we were not, or to show the public that we were not accepting waxed cardboard. Back in the day, waxed cardboard was actually used with wax, which is a natural product that can break down. However, these days, it's actually a petroleum-based lining, which does not break down on the compost. And it cannot be recycled either, so the best place for waxed cardboard is in the garbage. So when it comes to situations like that, we really recommend the companies that get the waxed cardboard, usually it's grocery stores or restaurants, to see if those suppliers have take-back programs. Because waxed cardboard is water resistant, it has a longer life shelf than regular cardboard. So that's kind of our solution right now. Also storage tips. Learning what the best way to store your food in the freezer with the lid, making sure everything's clean to avoid mold and what have you. And then incorporating compost in your life. Just gardening and growing your own food and yeah. And utilizing, again, like I said, your resources. Utilizing Cedar Grove. If you have questions of what can be composted, feel free to reach out. We field those questions all the time, every day. So, and yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sierra. Thank you. So our last speaker is Socorro. Is that right? Okay, Socorro Medina, and she is from Seattle Public Utilities, so she's kind of the person who wraps it all up, and she deals with all of the different companies. So she works with Recology, and she works with Cedar Grove. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Can I use this instead?
You sure can.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, you hear me? Hi everyone, thank you for coming and thank you for inviting me. Let me get my presentation out here. And I think I wanted to use this just because I tend to kind of walk around a little bit, so it's easier this way. So my name is Socorro Medina. I'm the multifamily recycling and composting program manager for Seattle. And basically my job is working with property managers, maintenance staff, and multifamily residents to help them recycle and compost better. And how much time do I have, Bonnie, just so that I don't, 10 minutes. That's great, that's great to know. So at Seattle Public Utilities, we provide water, sewer, and solid waste. So garbage services, garbage recycle and compost services for Seattle residents. And we have staff that, when it comes to recycling garbage and compost, we have staff that does education and outreach like myself. And then we have a lot of contracts because the city is so large. We don't have staff that can do all the operations, so we have contracts with folks like Recology, like Cedar Grove, like WM, to do a lot of the operations. So for example, we have a contract with Recology to do the collection of normally garbage, recycle, and compost in several apartments and homes in this area of the city. And there's a contract that specifies what materials are accepted. So when there are questions about if something is accepted or not, we go back to those contracts to figure out exactly what's spelled out there. And then there's also commercial services. So like the compost service that you have is directly with Cedar Grove, and that's a commercial service. So then the hauler is the person that will tell you, like, we accept this or we don't accept this. And I wanted to say that just because I know that questions always come up about that. So I just wanted to make sure that we knew about it. So I'm going to go kind of fast because I think we cover a lot already with the presentation that Laura and Sierra gave. But basically, solid waste, when we talk about solid waste, we're talking about compost, recycle, and garbage. Those are kind of the most common wastes that we have in Seattle. We talked about recycle already, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. Except to say that when we talk about plastics, we normally focus on bottles and containers just because there's so many plastics and it gets so confusing so fast. So as Laura mentioned, if you have questions, we have a website, we have a Seattle website where you can look it up. There's thousands of items in this website. There's also the King County that Laura showed, but I recommend that you go to this one first. And then if you don't find something, give us feedback. So there's a button there where you can say, I didn't find what I was looking for, and you can put that information. And in addition to that, you can send us an email and tell us, hey, I was looking for this thing. You can even send us a picture if it's something really obscure that is hard to describe, and then we can get back to you and let you know how to dispose of an item. So yeah, wishful recycling is a problem. So well, we talked about this already, but the main contaminant in the recycling, what do you think it is?
Plastic.
Plastic. Plastic.
Well, plastic bags, probably.
Plastic bags, yeah. So that's that's like after the video that Laura shows. Those are those rollers. They're all jammed up with plastic bags. So starting 2020, we took, I was talking about those contracts that regulate what materials are accepted. So we took plastic bags and plastic film out of the materials that are accepted in Seattle because it was causing a lot of problems. So now, if you want to get rid of it, there's drop-off options. And I believe that you have collection here, right? Of plastic film. So, okay, we can talk about it later. Yeah, it's hard, but there's some options for drop-off recycling. Compost, we already talked about it, so I'm probably not gonna talk about it too much. We talked about, it has to say compostable, right, for plastic bags. Make sure to look for that word. Yeah, the common contaminants here. Plastic, right, plastic bags. There's also the stickers, metal, glass. Okay, so I will talk about garbage a little bit. So those are the top items that we want in garbage: plastic bags, wraps, and wrappers. If you don't have access to a drop-off program to recycle, also bubble envelopes and mailers like the Amazon white and black mailer, styrofoam and food trays. There's ways to recycle and collect these things, but they're not available to everybody, and It's a little bit of a project sometimes. So if you don't have access to that, then we want this in the garbage. Diapers and pet waste, hygiene products and personal protective equipment. So, like garbage goes to a landfill in Oregon, is 300 miles from Seattle. It's a long way. But I think because we have been, letting people know that it's bad to use their garbage. We're having issues with contamination in the recycling and the compost. So I think us as educators, we've been going through this process of saying, it's okay to put these things on the garbage. There's nothing wrong to putting things in the garbage. If they came into your house and you have them and you need to get rid of them and there's no way of recycling, then the garbage is the best place for them. Our landfills they're not our landfills. We have a contract with a company that owns a landfill. They manage it really well. It's really far away. It's a place in Oregon where there's hardly any rain, so it's far away from the waterbeds. So I think, I just wanted to say that, if it's something that's already in your house and you don't have an option to recycle, it's okay to put it in the garbage. If you feel bad about it or you don't like that item, then you can make different options before the item comes into your house, right? You can make a decision, different decision before it comes into your house. But there's a point where we just have to say, okay, well, this is going to go to the garbage, and it's better than contaminating the recycle or the compost. So what are Seattle residents putting in the garbage? So we do every 5 years, we do a study, and we do a sample of actually all 3 different types of waste, but in this case I'm going to show you the garbage. And we look at different seasons, we look at different areas of the city. It's a very long, complicated study to get like a really robust information of what's left in our garbage. So we just did one in 2020, and this is what we found. So about 40% of our garbage is actually garbage. It should be there. There's another like 11% or so that could be recyclable if people take it to different drop-off location places. So this is plastic film, paint, textiles, things like that. There's another 20%, 21% that's curbside recyclable. So paper, plastic, glass, metal. And then there's 30% that is compostable. And this is something that we're working really hard to address, because about 20% of our garbage is edible food or food scraps. And this has a huge environmental impact. So we're working really hard to try to address that. So what are the impacts of placing those recyclables and compostables in the garbage? Well, first is being out of compliance. In Seattle, recyclables and compostables are not accepted in the garbage. And then there's also, there's also economic impacts. So this is a little bit about the cost of collections in Seattle. Garbage collection is expensive in Seattle. Compostable collection is affordable, and then recyclable collection actually is provided for free. We include the fee in the garbage, and so we make those collection rates in such a way to try to incentivize recycling and composting. So if buildings actually recycle all the recyclables and compost all the compostables, they may be able to downsize their garbage containers and save some money. So that's one part of it. And then the other part is that we're sending all these materials to the landfill that are actually a commodity, materials that have value. So we definitely want to use them and reuse them. So the issue, the environmental issue is, like being said before, when food waste goes to the landfill, it produces methane, which is a greenhouse gas, and it contributes to global warming. By contrast, if we use those food scraps to make compost, it actually has all the positive environmental impacts that we just saw about. And similarly, if we use recycled materials as the feedstock to make new products, then there's less energy and less greenhouse gas emissions that are needed to make these materials. So if we think about what's the big picture and how can we reduce our impact on the environment, there's a few, maybe like 3 tips that I wanted to leave you with here. So the first one is to focus in waste prevention. And I'm not sure if you're back doing the Broadway, the Monday market or not. Yeah, that's great. So I think you do a fantastic job. That's waste prevention in action. I wish we had that all over the city, really. So that's fantastic. In one of our flyers, which I'm going to leave here with Bonnie, so we talk about our garbage, recycled compost, and then we also have a reuse panel. So we talk about different ideas of how to reuse and how to prevent waste. I wanted to share also about this, it's called the Drawdown Project, and it's a nonprofit organization that looks at solutions that are going to help us get to a level where the greenhouse gas emissions stop going up and actually start decreasing. So they looked at 100 solutions to get to there, and amazingly, the first one is to reduce food waste. So if we focus on reducing the amount of food waste that we waste, that's probably the best thing we can do for the environment. That has a huge impact. And then the third thing here that I want to mention is, I know as solid waste educators, we've been focusing on how to get rid of things, but now we're kind of starting to think about not just what we call the end of life, how do we get rid of materials, but actually, what's the impact of the materials to their whole life cycle? So if you think about when the materials are extracted, manufactured, distributed, they're used, and then end of life, like throughout the whole life cycle, what are the environmental impacts of all the materials that we use in our day-to-day, and how can we make better decisions as consumers to decrease that impact? So we're working on that, and we're trying to put together information that's useful for consumers to make better decisions. So one example that I wanted to show you is this. This is the information of what are the greenhouse gas emissions of a typical Seattle household related to all the things that the household consumes. Even if the emissions happen in another country, in another state. A lot of the emission inventories are based on just the city and ignore the consumption that the city has and what's the impact that that city has in other places. So in this type of inventory, we consider that consumption, and this is kind of how it looks. So it tells you here the emissions in metric tons of a typical Seattle household, and so you can see gasoline has a huge impact. But then you can start drilling into specific things. For example, here in the foods category, you can see what is the impact of different types of foods, different type of behaviors. So this is really useful for us as the city to influence the policies that we make, but we think it's also useful information to give to the citizens of Seattle so that they can see, oh, for my lifestyle, what kind of decisions can I make to have a lower impact on the environment. And I think that's my last one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakura.
Okay, we have some time for question and answers. Let's get our mic runners mic'd up.
You share. Here. You share this one, right?
Thank you.
Oh.
You're ready?
Okay, so, Jean?
I have a number of questions about things that I'm not clear where they did, that I have, and I'm not clear where they go. You created one problem for me. Namely, you said that shredded paper cannot be recycled. So what do you do with it?
So, yeah, shredded paper can't be recycled because it's so small. So that goes into kind of the size issue that we were talking about. It doesn't get sorted properly in our facility. So it's kind of tough. If you want to find somewhere other than the garbage to bring your shredded paper, there are shredding events where you can take your paper and they'll shred it for you and then dispose of it properly. I don't know how much of that gets recycled, but general rule of thumb is that shredded paper is garbage.
So there's nothing. So basically, I should put it in something and throw it in the garbage.
Just a minute. We learned earlier that the shredded paper, and most of the paper that we do is just regular paper, it's nothing special, in small amounts, not gallon bags, we can put it on compost.
Yeah, so again, we do take food soil paper, so if it's mixed in with all the food, it's going to be food soil regardless, so it will be able to break down the compost.
Right,
yeah.
so you can, if you're doing a little bit of, in your small container and you're shredding it.
Yeah, especially if it can't be
If you take it
recycled.
back and put it in the bin in the waste recycle rooms, it's going to be with all the other food, so there. Can we get a question for someone else so that we can spread the Jerry? Okay, Ned?
Sierra, the compostable containers for food that kind of look like plastic, how long does it take those to break down?
It kind of depends on what it is. Even though all of our compostable products are made out of corn, they're compostable. Some of them take a little bit longer to break down, like our compostable cutlery. But usually in the life cycle, if it doesn't break down the first go around, we actually leave any like bigger mass on the side in like a separate pile, and then actually add it back into the first phase to go in again, so nothing gets wasted. And it's actually super helpful because that pile of bigger or like organic matter has those microbes in it already, so it kind of is like adding yeast to bread. So it's always we can always add it back in to go through the process again. So usually we like to see it gone in like 3 months, and if it isn't, then we'll just put it back in the first phase.
Thank you.
One more.
The second question, then, is my hard one. When I came here, I'd been living in a private house, and I had a lot of weed and ortho weed be gone, and the grass and weed killer things. And I've emptied those, but I've got two of them. And what do I do with them?
You can actually put them in your compost. In our composting process, because it gets so hot, it'll actually kill off the weed pollen, bacteria, all the pathogens. So
the chemicals.
Oh, chemical? Yeah, no, yeah. I want to say. Oh, you guys.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, no, I think, can you hear me? I cannot hear myself. Yeah, so it's not weeds, right? It's weed killer.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's hazardous waste, and so it has to go to the hazardous waste site. We have 2 different sites in Seattle where those are collected.
Oh, sorry.
They're collected here. You can take it to B3.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned that one of the problems is our fruit stickers, and I assume that they're plastic, and that's one of the problems. What if they were paper? Would that make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I don't know if they would last as long on the produce if they were paper, but that would be a great next step.
Because that seems to be something we could do, work on that as a change in the law to require that.
Yeah, and in some countries, it's not even a sticker or anything. It's actually like stamped on the produce with some sort of edible ink or something. So, or tattooed on the fruit. So that would be a good thing.
And then the other question had to do with milk cartons. And are milk cartons that have plastic on the inside of them?
Yeah, so milk cartons are recyclable. They just have to be clean and fairly dry. So just yeah, there's a special process for materials like that. Whichever facility that we send it to after our MRF, they have a special way of breaking it down properly. So it is recyclable.
Okay, Ned?
I'd like Bonnie to clarify where we put the boxes that all of us collect in huge quantities from the bistro or from the dining room. And I see many of them put into recycling, which I believe is wrong. Would you clarify that for us?
Yes. If they're the clamshells, those are paper. I mean, they're not paper. They're PLA, plant. They're made out of plant. So the clamshells, the big ones, even the small ones that look like plastic, are not plastic. They're made out of plants. Those go in compost. The ones that go into recycling are the ones they put the salads in, because they haven't been able to get the compostable plain salad containers from the vendors. So until they can get them, otherwise, that's how that works. And the glasses, the fruit comes in, and you can see it, it says glass, what does it say? Greenware, or ECO. Those are compostable. Okay.
I have one question.
Jean?
This is a small thing, but tea bags, because they have a tiny metal with them. What
Yeah.
happens?
So those cannot be put in the compost. Can you recycle them? They're probably too small to be recycled too. So the best place for them in the garbage. Also, yeah. So the foil inside. Another thing is receipts. Receipts have a BPA lining in them, so they cannot be composted, or can they be recycled? Yeah, or recycled. So
Certain places do have recyclable receipts. For example, PCC, their receipts are recyclable, but you would have to ask just to make sure. So.
I just wanted to clear up the questions about the stuff that we get in the bistro.
Okay.
Just look for the sign that says that it's compostable. If it doesn't have any kind of signs on it, put it in the trash.
Jean?
Could you go over all of the numbers that are found on the triangles? I thought we were told that only 1 and 2 are recyclable.
Yeah, I mean,
So yeah, the numbers, us at Recology, at this point in time, we are kind of saying ignore the numbers because there are so many, it's so hard to keep track of, and some of them might not be super up to date even. So what we say is if it's a rigid plastic, if it's not a plastic film and it's clean and dry and it's larger than 3 inches, generally that plastic can go in the recycle.
Ned?
Can I add a little something?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question about the triangles and good answer too. I just want to say, normally those numbers indicate the chemistry of the material. So they weren't meant to be an indication of recyclability or anything. So it's just the chemistry of the material. So yeah, if it's a bottle, if it's a container, it's recyclable.
So Carl, what is the progress on the signs on the waste management trucks that say they're using clean fuel and they're not? And number 2, are you going to tell us what town in Oregon is getting all those trucks? Because I lived in a tiny town in Maine that had a contract and we were bothered by trucks coming day and night through town. So your last comment about make wise decisions so that we don't have so much to put in the garbage.
Yeah, so I believe that the WM is going to change their trucks. I don't know exactly how soon it's going to happen, but they've been notified that they need to change the trucks. And I just saw it in the news, so I know that's happening. And then the landfill, I believe it's called Arlington. It's just east of the Cascades.
And most of it goes by rail.
All of it goes by rail, yeah.
From here.
Oh, okay. Dorothy, you'll be later.
Okay.
I wondered if you could repeat the information about where you can take, I think you said plastic bags. Safeway was one, and I can't remember now which of you were telling this, but places that you can take hard to recycle things. I thought that included plastic bags, but did I hear correctly?
Yes, you did. So most grocery stores will take plastic film. There's just kind of a bin. You might have to ask an associate there where it is, but you can just put your plastic in the bin. It's plastic film specifically, into the bin for free. And bagandfilmrecycling.org is the website where you can enter in your location, and it will give you locations where you can drop off your plastic film.
And tell me what plastic film means. Is that the little bags at the grocery store?
Yeah, so like grocery bags, the plastic that is usually around paper towels or toilet paper, saran wrap is technically a plastic film, just pretty much any plastic film that you can easily stick your finger through. So like it's like the stretchy kind as opposed to the plastic that a salad, like lettuce will come in. That plastic isn't stretchy, you might know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so like kind of stretchy plastic that you can stick your finger through.
Remember, it has to be clean and dry.
Yes, clean and dry.
Nick?
No, right there.
Some of us recycle unwanted mail in the mailroom, and we put it in the paper bin. And I realize it has plastic windows on it, so we ruined the works.
Well, I wanted to step in here because I don't think that window is plastic. I think it's cellulose.
Well, so in the Seattle contract, we allowed the envelopes with the window. So I think, Laura, I know there are municipalities, maybe Recology doesn't accept it, but in Seattle it's part of the contract, so it is actually accepted. We take it. We haven't heard. We can chat, but we haven't heard that it's been an issue or anything like that.
Good. We would live to see another day. Okay, one more question, and then it's lights out. Oh, good. Now we know everything.
And come to the fair tomorrow.
And come to the fair tomorrow and practice what you've learned. And thank you all very much. Thank you for coming.
Tomorrow afternoon, the string